Modern agriculture is entirely dependent on the use of incredibly powerful, heavy-duty machinery. It is truly difficult to even imagine our vast fields without the presence of those massive, high-performance tractors. These machines are out there working hard in the spring for planting, later for essential crop care, throughout the summer and fall for the harvest, and then once more when it is finally time to plow the fields. The practice of farming itself has been around for easily 10,000 years. In the very beginning, the early farmer had to make the soil fertile using nothing but his own two hands.
That's why he soon looked for allies, which were livestock. He started with horses, cows, cattle and pigs. Agriculture became more diverse, moving beyond just human labor into the whole animal realm. And as Homo faber, as we humans began the long process of developing various tools and equipment. At first it was merely simple sticks and bones, but over time they became increasingly complex and sophisticated. And if you look at the development of agriculture, you could say that around 1800s, right at the start of the Industrial Revolution, farmers were still doing this primal form of manual labor, but the technical aids were getting better, and there are
Back then, it took 3 farmers working all year just to feed 1 additional city dweller. Today, a single farmer in Central Europe can easily provide food for more than 140 others.
In every single sense of the word, farm work isn't really just manual labor anymore. It has become high-tech. It is all about modern technology, machines, equipment and technical aids. Tractors play an incredibly important and vital role.
Tractors have been in Germany for about a century. We're taking you on a journey through this fascinating 100-year history of technology and taking a look at the future of the tractor, arguably the most important machine in the countryside. At the end of the 18th century, a machine began its rise to prominence that would become the predecessor of today's tractor, the steam engine.
Animal power proved too weak for certain tasks, especially driving threshing machines. And the locomobile, the mobile but not self-propelled steam engine, suddenly brought a level of power to farms that could be used continuously and intensively.
These so-called locomobiles were mainly used for threshing, but also in the dairy industry and for fodder cutters.
You'd start them in the morning, and with proper maintenance, they could work well for 12 hours straight. That wasn't the case with horses and cattle, the earlier draft animals. The animals needed their rest breaks, they got tired, and the maintenance and care they required was obviously much higher.
At the very beginning, locomobiles imported all the way from England were serviced and repaired in Germany, but soon a robust domestic industry began to develop, such as the Wolf Company in Magdeburg or the Heuke firm in Gathesleben. If 2 such locomobiles were available, they could even be utilized together for the purpose of plowing fields.
Then maybe less for leveling, but certainly for clearing. That meant you needed large consolidated areas. It was said that using steam plowing locomotives wasn't worth it for a total land area of less than about 800 hectares. That explains why stamp plows were only for large-scale farming, for the estates and the big landowners. At most, there were about 1,000 stem plow sets in Germany. They consistently covered about 5% of the empire's total farmland.
A steam-powered plow can manage between 12 and 16 hectares in a single day, which is far more than what a team of oxen could ever hope to accomplish in that time. Nevertheless, the steam plow was also considered to be something of a prestige item.
Farmers have a saying, what a farmer is, he shows at the hitch. That's where the love for those big, heavy draft horses comes from, and it's even truer for steam plowing locomotives. The bigger and more powerful the machine, the more status it gave the owner, and maybe that's lasted until today, with the love for big tractors. The whole debate about over-mechanization might have some of its roots right here.
Shortly after the First World War, the first machines with internal combustion engines appeared in the fields. Man called theirs a motor plow. The Fendt brothers from the Allgäu called their machine a grass mower, just like the Kramer brothers from Lake Constance. Hermann Lanz, hailing from Aulendorf in Swabia, famously chose to name his motor mower Samson. These machines are the direct predecessors of the tractors that we all know today. During the 1920s, you could hear more and more loud banging and hissing sounds echoing across the fields. The age of the agricultural tractor had finally arrived. The first models, like the Lanz Bulldog HL with 12 horsepower, still looked a lot like stationary engines mounted on a frame with 4 wheels.
The Lanz Bulldog features a two-stroke engine, which is a massive, large-volume, single-cylinder design, boasting an impressive capacity of up to 10 full liters of displacement. These design elements come together to define the character of this remarkable vehicle. It features a low RPM, yet produces a unique, distinctive sound, giving the car an unmistakable, visceral sensation of raw, unbridled strength and commanding power. All of these various elements really seem to resonate in such a profound and perfect way, deep within the very heart of the farmer's own complex psyche.
Spurred on by the Lanz Bulldog, other manufacturers followed, like Hanomag with its WD tractors powered by gasoline and kerosene.
Back then, people used to say, because these vehicles were so unreliable, the tractor stinks and smokes and never works when you need it. Reliability only came gradually. The first tractors weren't the only vehicles on the farm. They were what you'd call peak breakers. They were meant to supplement animal draft power when things got tough, like during soil cultivation or especially during the harvest. But the horses weren't obsolete because of them.
Early tractors were not just used in the fields, however, they were often employed to provide power for other types of heavy machinery, such as for threshing grain or sawing wood. Back in the 1920s, the belt pulley was an absolutely essential piece of equipment.
Just like with steam engines, you'd put the drive belt on. The power take-offs that came later weren't on this first generation of tractors yet, even though the first PTO was developed by a French engineer as early as 1907. But it took a good 15 years before they actually went into mass production. That's primarily because mobile implements simply weren't considered nearly as significant or essential back in those days when compared to the more common stationary-driven machines.
The MTZ 120, which was manufactured by the DEUTZ company in the city of Cologne, was already considered a truly versatile and universal tractor. However, the firm only managed to sell about 400 units of this flagship model throughout the period between the late 20s and the early 30s.
The first tractors, let's say the tractors from the period after the First World War, were only for innovative farmers. These were pioneer farmers who were open to progress. Economically, it probably didn't make any sense at all in the beginning, but that's part of farming in general. There are always people who want to try new, unconventional ways. And so there were always plenty of farmers who were more than willing to put those tractors to good use. Indeed.
To effectively transfer engine power to the ground, manufacturers have explored many engineering concepts. Crawler tractors were common back then. Here is a classic post-war Hanomag model.
They basically came from North America, where wheeled tractors didn't stand a chance in the wet lowlands of California. That's where they got the idea to use tracks or crawlers to get the engine power onto the field despite the wet ground. And during the First World War, people saw these vehicles as tanks on the continent. And that was the primary reason why we decided to start producing crawler tractors here, right after the First World War as well. Hanomag was particularly successful. They first entered the competitive agricultural vehicle market by introducing their specialized crawler tractors. The firm, Linke Hoffmann, based in Breslau, was another notable manufacturer. Even to this very day, the crawler design remains unsurpassed when it comes to achieving optimal traction and effectively transferring engine power onto the field.
Pneumatic tires were a milestone on the way to the modern tractor. While the first wheeled tractors had exclusively steel or later solid rubber wheels, rubber tires became increasingly popular from the early 30s on. The advantage: they can pull more on light soil and on the road. Plus, the farmer can easily switch from working in the field to driving on the road without any modifications, and both the engines and transmissions are now specifically designed for tractors. The Cologne-based company, DEUTZ, for instance, offered a tractor as early as 1934 that did not require the usual frame due to its highly innovative design. This specific model was widely nicknamed the steel tractor because of its unique, fully welded transmission housing. Tractors from the early 30s usually share one common trait: they are incredibly powerful, perhaps far too powerful, and therefore far too expensive for the vast majority of our family farms.
Back in the mid-30s, the primary goal suddenly became the motorization of family farms as well. They were looking to free up labor, for example, to assist with the production of munitions. They needed farmers' tractors, 10, 12, 14 horsepower, and the best solution, maybe the most successful one, came from Cologne DEUTZ. It was the 11 DEUTZ, a single-cylinder farmer's tractor. The idea was that it had the pulling power, if you will, of two good draft horses. They usually estimated 5 horsepower per horse. So if it put 11 horsepower on the field, that was exactly 2 draft horses. The Sachse.
The 11 DEUTZ features a simple single-cylinder engine that is started manually with a hand crank. It is a truly solid and robust design that first went on sale back in 1936.
Basically, it was the DEUTZ 11 that made the tractor truly popular. But before that, it was always considered an exclusive thing. But suddenly, you had something that possessed, to use a modern term, genuine, broad-based appeal.
Many manufacturers chose to follow the design of the 11 DEUTZ, though certainly not every single one of them. The Hanover-based manufacturer Hanomag, for example, took a different path with its farmer's tractor, the RL20.
We looked to passenger cars because nothing else was available in the small engine range. So they took the small diesel engine from the Hanomag Record car, modified the chassis, added larger tires, a load-bearing axle, and reinforced the frame. The advantage of the whole thing was good driving comfort, a suspended front axle and hydraulic four-wheel brakes plus a handbrake gave the customer several comfort advantages. That's why it got the nickname Farmer's Taxi.
Was it really worth all that effort in the end? While they managed to sell nearly 20,000 units of the 11 DEUTZ, Hanomag only managed to sell a mere quarter of that total with their RL20 model.
In actual practice, it proved to be a bit too delicate for the average farmer. The 11 DEUTZ held a slight advantage with its compact and reliable design, whereas this one possessed more of a car-like character, which is really quite clearly visible.
The era immediately preceding the Second World War was defined by a rapidly growing tractor market. Many models, such as this first tractor from Güldner, were highly versatile and sold nationwide. But many manufacturers also focused their primary efforts on their own specific regions and unique local requirements. Take the Swabian family-owned enterprise Holder, for instance. In their early days, they exclusively manufactured single-axle machines that required the farmer to walk along behind them. These Holder tractors were primarily utilized within the sectors of fruit and vegetable cultivation, as well as in the specialized field of viticulture. While these smaller, helpful machines still relied on gasoline engines, diesel fuel had largely become the standard choice for the much larger, heavy-duty models. Due to the significant extra cost involved, most farmers chose to forego having their tractors, such as this classic FAR T22, delivered with an electric starter system. If the engine was cold, you usually had to screw in an ignition pellet or a fuse before starting. Then the engine was cranked into motion without any compression. Once the RPM, fuel mixture and compression were properly set, the diesel would start. However, some engines were already being equipped with glow plugs back in the 1930s. Many companies discovered the tractor market in the late 30s. Spurred by the success of the farmer's tractor, even firms that previously had little to do with tractors jumped on the bandwagon, like the Deutsche Lieferwagengesellschaft in Berlin, or Dulliwag for short. But the boom in the German tractor market didn't last very long.
During World War II, liquid fuels were primarily used for armaments and for administration. Agriculture received modest allocations at first, and from 1942 the allocation of liquid fuels ceased entirely. The alternative was the use of solid fossil fuels, wood. From that, a whole separate line of tractors emerged, specifically the wood gas-powered vehicles. These machines utilized a standard gas generator, in this particular instance manufactured by the Inward company based in Cologne. Various other manufacturers adopted and utilized them accordingly. For instance, just 80 kilos of wood provided enough power for 4 full hours of work at 25 horsepower. The previous
A conventional diesel engine served as the basis for the wood gas tractor, though it had to be equipped with external ignition. Not only were new tractors now delivered with wood gasifiers, but older ones were also retrofitted. Even after World War II, such tractors could still be seen in many places. Year Zero, marking the war's end in 1945, signaled a fresh, challenging start for the agricultural sector. Tractor makers with parts in stock continued producing their reliable pre-war models. DEUTZ, famous for robust water-cooled steel tractors, is one prominent example. Meanwhile, many other companies had to improvise much more extensively. With FAR's first post-war tractor in Gottmadingen, the D28U, you can see at first glance that many parts from a wood gas tractor were used. Still, these stopgaps weren't enough. Only about 40,000 tractors had survived the war in all of Germany, far fewer than were needed.
Initial estimates suggested that a total of maybe 300,000 tractors would be enough for all of West German agriculture. By the year 1950, it became abundantly clear that those initial estimates would soon be rendered outdated, primarily because the agricultural sector was truly gaining significant momentum. And quite suddenly, tractor manufacturing transformed into an incredibly hot field. Brand new production plants entered the market, while existing facilities ramped up to provide much greater capacity. If I may say so, the return to the manufacturing of tractors in the years following the Second World War was an absolute and unmitigated success story.
One of the first new designs after the war was the Allgäuer R18. The power of the horizontal single-cylinder engine was transmitted via V-belts. By the end of the 40s, the Swabian company sold more than 1,000 units of this reliable farmer's tractor. The first Porsche tractor was also built by Allgäuer, the AP17. R stands for Allgäuer, the letter P for Porsche. Volkswagen designer Ferdinand Porsche had already worked on a people's tractor in the pre-war years. Now he had his modern, lightweight tractor manufactured under license. The metalworking company Allgäuer had nothing to do with tractors for over 40 years. Now, in the early post-war years, the Swabians, like many others, discovered tractor manufacturing for themselves. In Hamburg, for example, the North German tractor factory, or NORDTRAK for short, was created from scratch. Company owner Georg Willer initially built tractors based on decommissioned US Jeeps before causing a stir with his diesel bulls. The trademark of the NORDTRAK bulls, 4 equal-sized wheels and all-wheel drive, a novelty on the German tractor market that proved itself especially on marshy ground. However, even the long-established tractor manufacturers in Germany began releasing brand-new designs only a few short years after the war. Güldner, for instance, built upon their pre-war production success by introducing their 28-horsepower A28 model. While the Güldner firm could rely on its own engines, they were forced to buy in transmissions. It was exactly the opposite for the Fendt company from the Allgäu region. With their iconic diesel steeds, Fendt made a truly significant contribution to getting agriculture moving again after the war, especially throughout the south of the Federal Republic.
The Fendt people never claimed to be able to do everything. They focused on specific things. At one point it was the clutch, but above all it was the transmission. The Fendt people proved themselves as transmission specialists, and they very quickly gave up on attempts to get into their own engine production. Engines were bought in and combined with their own transmissions, and then a vehicle was made that was tailored exactly to the needs of their usually local clientele.
Just like before the war, two companies are mainly responsible for heavy tractors, Lanz and Hanomag. While Lanz continues to rely on its proven hot bulb engines after the war, Hanomag puts its trust in its powerful diesel engines. The R45, for example, one of Hanomag's first post-war developments, has a displacement of nearly 6 liters and produces 45 horsepower, the ideal tractor for large-scale operations.
We can look at this multi-spindle drilling and tapping machine as a prime example of highly efficient modern production methods. Once the electric trigger has been activated, this advanced machine automatically completes every single hole and thread on 2 separate tractor gearbox housings in just a matter of a few minutes. However, there is no machine that can possibly accomplish this. The work of human hands remains something that is still entirely irreplaceable. It demands a very high level of skill and intense focused concentration throughout the entire process of assembling the gearbox and the engine. The entire assembly process requires a total of just 120 minutes to complete. Furthermore, this specific step, much like every other stage in the process, is subsequently verified by our team of inspectors. Consequently, the overall quality of this high-value precision manufacturing is significantly bolstered through such meticulous and rigorous inspection. A 4-hour exam on a special test bench concludes this production process. The meticulous and conscientious level of care taken throughout the entire engine assembly process serves as a truly fascinating and captivating attraction for all of our visiting guests. The production output at the Neuss IH plant had to be doubled, primarily due to the significantly increasing demand for McCormick products. Consequently, a finished tractor now rolls off the assembly line every 10 minutes.
A promotional film by IHC about tractor construction in Neuss in the mid-50s. The American International Harvester Company is successful in Germany with its standardized diesel tractors between 14 and 30 horsepower, but also because the company can offer various attachments and implements for field work. The range includes grass mowers, hay tedders and loaders, potato planters, fertilizer spreaders, forage harvesters, and towed combine harvesters.
It also manages to handle grass-cutting tasks with complete ease by utilizing the McCormick International DE22P mounted mower unit. At the very same time, the swath is being spread out by utilizing the McCormick International DCL4T piece of equipment. The most efficient working methods will quickly become a simple matter, of course, when you rely on McCormick machines, especially when you are out in the fields tedding your hay. And when using the side delivery rake, even this helper, who has become increasingly rare these days, still finds that there is something left for them to do.
It is the absolute heyday of tractor manufacturing across all of Germany. In 1955 alone, nearly 100,000 tractors were newly registered in the Federal Republic, a record that has never been surpassed since. The tractor is already far more than just a simple towing machine. The power take-off shaft is now essential for driving mobile equipment, as is the integrated hydraulic system. This often makes the presence of a second man out in the field entirely unnecessary.
The labor force was being steadily pulled away from the agricultural sector. Meanwhile, the industrial sector was booming, and suddenly the family farm was reduced to a solitary one-man operation, leaving the farmer or his wife on the tractor, expected to manage every single task entirely alone. Consequently, the engineers felt they were in a position to develop specific components to address that. Simply put, the severe shortage of labor in agriculture was the primary catalyst for the rapid development of our modern motorized farming systems.
Hanomag, for example, develops its own regulated hydraulic system, which, among other things, makes plowing easier.
It's called a reversible plow because I can turn the plow from the driver's seat. I don't have to get off, turn the tractor around, and I can plow the next furrow in the same track without having to drive back. And thus when I've reached the end again, I turn it again from the driver's seat, turn the tractor around and go back. So I don't ultimately have to drive back and start over. I can basically plow everything in one go. That's why it's a reversible plow. Right here we have a pair of gauge wheels that are essentially designed to run along the surface of the unplowed land. And you'll notice that these specific gauge wheels maintain a constant direct connection to the main hydraulic control unit by way of this particular cable. So if the plow happens to sink deeper, for instance when it encounters softer soil, the plow will naturally dip down for a brief moment. At that point, the gauge wheels are essentially forced upwards because they are currently traveling along the surface of the unplowed land. And as soon as those gauge wheels are pushed up, the hydraulic system automatically lifts the plow slightly, and just like that, I have regained the exact same plowing depth. This all happens lightning fast, of course, and in reality it is a remarkably simple mechanism.
In the C218, as with many other Hanomag tractors of this time, it's not a conventional diesel engine under the hood, but a two-stroke, a diesel without valves. This makes the engine much lighter and also cheaper to manufacture. However, the farmers remain rather skeptical.
People always called them field mopeds or bangers, whatever, because two strokes have a high-pitched engine sound, while four strokes, due to their volume, always embody strength and certain weightiness.
While the traditional company Hanomag struggles with declining numbers, another prestigious name moves into the top ranks of registration statistics from the mid-50s, Porsche. From 1956, the red tractors are no longer built at Allgäu, but under the management of Mannesmann in Friedrichshafen. The iconic design of these vibrant red tractors, their innovative lightweight construction with high aluminum content, and the surprisingly low price point convinced so many farmers that Porsche briefly became a serious competitor, even challenging the market leader, DEUTZ. For decades, tractor manufacturers had equipped their engines with water cooling. The Eicher brothers countered this trend at the end of the 40s with their first air-cooled engine. Farmers had repeatedly had problems with water-cooled engines, for example, because the water froze in winter and the engine block cracked. The ED16, the name stands for Eicher diesel, with 16 horsepower, comes onto the market in 1948. Air is supplied to the engine from the outside via a blower.
As long as they were 1- and 2-cylinder engines, it wasn't really a problem. When they become 4- and 6-cylinders, then cooling becomes a relatively big problem given the low airflow these tractors generate. The overall cooling effect of air cooling is consistently more modest than that of water cooling, but it really suits the needs of the farmers, because the principle that a farmer's machine must be simple, otherwise it just isn't a machine at all, has well truly found its own niche here.
Shortly after Eicher, DEUTZ also entered the market with its own air-cooled engines. The successor to the legendary Elva DEUTZ has featured this unit since 1950, which now produces 15 horsepower. However, even these air-cooled engines are not entirely free from the need for regular maintenance.
Maintain the filters regularly, check them in the morning before you start, and also you have an air filter, of course, which you have to watch out for, and it shouldn't get too dusty, of course. and you have to pay a bit of attention while working and, well, check it more often. Yeah, and make sure all the channels are clear, and yeah. Most of these tractors were also equipped with a gauge to monitor them whenever they started to overheat. And that was helpful because you could clearly see from the cockpit that the engine temperature was rising too high, which allowed you to take immediate action to address the situation and determine what was causing the problem.
Still, many engine manufacturers follow the successful examples and are soon building air-cooled ones themselves. Tractor manufacturers in turn, like FAR, are only too happy to use these engines. In the FAR D270, for example, a DEUTZ engine from the first air-cooled generation is at work, a two-cylinder with 32 horsepower. Whether it's a large or small tractor, like here with the first articulated models from the Metzingen company HOLDER, the air-cooled engine is also popular because it usually weighs less than its water-cooled brother. Whether it's a Sachs or MWM engine, as in the HOLDER A20 or Eicher and DEUTZ diesels, in the medium term, the air-cooled engine can't quite hold its own in agriculture.
It's also a question of, am I using tractors mainly for transport? Then air cooling is sufficient. But if I'm using the tractors primarily for plowing, for soil cultivation, then it has its disadvantages. The pros and cons went back and forth for quite a few years. Ultimately, water cooling has prevailed to this day.
While dozens of manufacturers in West Germany are actively vying for the farmers' business, in East Germany, known as the GDR, relatively few different models are being built, yet they are produced in massive quantities. More than 20,000 units of the Pioneer, which is a robust 42 horsepower wheel tractor, roll off the assembly line within the span of just a few short years.
Yes, the GDR also had a strong need for motorization. The politicians soon discovered that motorization was a lever to push forward collectivization. Machine exchange and rental stations were developed, which then received the GDR tractors. The farmers could rent these tractors partly at the price of their independence. Motorization of agriculture as a lever for enforcing political impulses, so that also shows what you can do with tractors.
In terms of innovation, East German tractors are in no way inferior to those in West Germany. As early as the late 1940s, even before the individual manufacturers were merged into a giant state-owned enterprise, the first equipment carrier, the so-called Mole, was created in Thuringia, a machine that can carry both attachments and a flatbed at the front.
They were preferred for use, for example, in large cattle stables, in specialized crop farms. They had a very powerful central beam. You could attach the corresponding tools very well to it. And they were then also sold in larger numbers throughout the Eastern Bloc eventually.
By the late 50s and early 60s, manufacturers in West Germany could only dream of seeing such large production numbers. For the time being, the farmers were already adequately supplied with all the tractors they required. The great pent-up demand that had accumulated after the war had finally been fully satisfied.
There were massive production capacities that were searching for sufficient demand, and the companies that were not positioned accordingly found themselves forced to withdraw from the competitive market once again, unfortunately. Here, for example, the Porsche company, Porsche Diesel, owned at the time by Mannesmann, for a long time among the top 3 in the registration statistics, but then hit by a relatively sharp decline. They stopped in the late 50s, early 60s. Other manufacturers, such as Steyr, for example, resigned, basically Wesseler, many providers who were on the market with their vehicles decided to or chose collaborations.
Fahr and Gültner, for example, split up tractor production. Almost identical tractors are sold at Gültner in Aschaffenburg and at Fahr in Gottmadingen, differing only in color and the shape of the hood and, of course, the name. The A2W Tessin from Gültner is called the D132W at Fahr. The Gültner Burgund becomes the D133 in Gottmadingen. The series is sold under the name Europa Series. Nevertheless, the end is soon near for both traditional manufacturers. Fahr is taken over by DEUTZ just a few years later. Güldner closes its tractor production at the end of the 60s due to falling production numbers, not an isolated case during this time. Porsche, for example, says goodbye to the tractor market as early as 1963, even though the company has a wide range with outputs of up to 50 horsepower in its program. Previously, Porsche Diesel had tried to take over the rest of MAN's tractor construction. Here too, sales figures had recently no longer been sufficient to remain economically viable. Within a decade, the number of tractor manufacturers in Germany shrinks by about half. The large manufacturers hold a distinct advantage as they can offer farmers nearly the entire spectrum of the tractor world. DEUTZ, for instance, features tractors ranging from 14 to 80 horsepower in their legendary D-series, ensuring the right machine for almost every farmer, whether it is for demanding field work or general tasks around the farm. Names that sound powerful and strong remain quite popular among farmers today. For instance, Eicher really made a name for itself back in the late 50s with its famous Predator series. These tractors carry bold names like Tiger, Panther, or even the King Tiger. The power these names are intended to express is increasingly a selling point. After all, the attachments are also getting larger. More power is constantly being demanded of the tractor, for example, when salvaging straw after the harvest. Throughout the 1960s, there was hardly any area of agriculture that could possibly manage to function without the use of a tractor. Manufacturers, who aren't quite as large as industry giants like DEUTZ or Hanomag, have to find their own niche and specialize. The Kramer company, for instance, really made a name for itself by producing incredibly powerful all-wheel drive tractors. The distinct advantage here was that their transmissions were all developed entirely in-house. As a result, this tractor from the 60s already features a synchronized power shift reversing transmission with 12 forward gears. The Freisinger Schlüterwerke, on the other hand, build on the image of strong-as-a-bear tractors and are successful with it. By the mid-60s, the company is already building its own 6-cylinder engines. Among the most unusual tractor models of the post-war period are the equipment carriers. Lanz is the first manufacturer to go into series production with this design in 1951. The driver usually sits at the back with the engine mostly next to or directly in front of him. The machine offers advantages over the conventional tractor not only because it can be fitted with a flatbed, but above all because it has several so-called mounting spaces.
And the working machines on tractors were always rear-mounted. The tractor driver didn't see what he was using. He had to turn his head. The alternative was to look for solutions to create new mounting spaces on the tractor. And then, of course, they came up with the equipment carrier, a vehicle that has 1, 2, 3 different mounting spaces. And the front mounting spaces are particularly attractive, of course, because suddenly the tractor driver could see what was happening in front of him. We're looking at a truly interesting and innovative technical solution. The seed drill is mounted directly on the main frame, making it fully visible to the driver, the very essence of modern precision farming. In this case, the design uses 2 heavy-duty rigid beams. Other manufacturers chose to utilize a single beam design, which led to a wide variety of different configurations. I think with the Ruhrstahl model, we even see something quite unique, which is, let's say, a distinct U-shaped beam. Ultimately, it always comes down to the same fundamental question. How can I effectively optimize the overall usability of my equipment?
Following the success of Lanz, various other agricultural manufacturers recognized the significant potential of specialized equipment carriers throughout the 1950s. North German manufacturer Richter, as a prime example, achieved great success with their innovative multi-track carrier models. These versatile machines were not merely sold under their own brand. Companies like Güldner and DEUTZ incorporated them into their lineups, having finished carriers delivered directly by Richter. While manufacturers initially relied upon existing traditional models for implements, such as harrows, plows, or seed drills, to adapt them to the carrier, over time they eventually developed their own specialized applications that were easier to operate and simpler to swap out. Fendt, for instance, famously advertised its highly efficient one-man system.
You see, an equipment carrier is never just a vehicle, it is always a system. And that means this seed drill might fit on this carrier, but it might not be compatible with another one at all. And since it's not just a seed drill, you've got the fertilizer spreader, the mounted crop sprayer, and the flatbed, which ideally should be tiltable too. and that way the equipment carrier ends up being almost the most expensive piece of equipment you can imagine in the agricultural sector.
A big step forward was the further development of the equipment carrier into a self-propelled potato harvester. This is attached to the carrier with 2 connectors and can be mounted or removed in about 7 minutes. It works with a spinner, sieve chain, sieve wheel, and sorting belt, among other things. The attendants are only required to manage the final sorting process while stationed at the picking table. Once gathered, the potatoes are collected within a tipping bunker, then efficiently transferred into waiting trailers positioned at the edge of the field. Meanwhile, any remaining stones, soil clods, and haulm are separated and fall directly back onto the field.
While equipment carriers offer a wide range of distinct advantages, there are still significant drawbacks that prove quite difficult to overcome. For instance, the engine power simply cannot be increased in an indefinite manner.
That's because the engine is in the back, and let's put it this way. You have a vehicle that's supposed to carry, push, pull, and be able to drive, and the engine is just one small element. There was really only one manufacturer who managed to get the engine power up to 100 horsepower and more later on. In that case, it was the Fendt company. That's why they actually lasted the longest in equipment carrier construction. The others pretty much gave up at around 40 horsepower.
Another all-purpose machine, however, has survived to this day, the Unimog. The name stands for Universal Motor Gerät, Universal Motorized Device. The Unimog was actually intended exclusively for agriculture. Outfitted with 4 equal-sized wheels, permanent all-wheel drive, a versatile flatbed, front and rear PTOs, and occasionally even a specialized mower bar, there is simply no task that the Unimog could not master. Originally developed by a team of former Mercedes aircraft engine designers, the Unimog officially entered into series production back in 1949. Over time, other industries also discovered the Unimog. Fire departments and the military sought the machine primarily for its off-road capabilities. Ultimately, Unimogs are seen much more often on the road as towing vehicles or municipal vehicles than in the fields. The Unimog has evolved over time into almost an entirely unique class of vehicle, and this is not just in terms of its incredible versatility or its legendary build quality. Even though modern Unimogs are no longer manufactured specifically for agricultural purposes, the fundamental concept behind this universal motorized device has not really changed much over the last 50 years, and neither, for that matter, has its iconic and highly distinctive shape. In 1972, a new era began for the tractor market, the era of so-called system tractors. The idea was that the driver should no longer sit at the back, but instead in the middle or even at the front.
You should see everything. He should see everything. So he should be able to monitor the use of the implements perfectly. It's also a question of, let's say, the tractor itself, where I put the weight. The first tractors were purely rear-wheel drive. The danger was the front end lifting up when something was attached to the back. So they went and moved the weight of the engine and the vehicle further forward to prevent that lifting. Now, in the beginning, the rear wheels were large and the front wheels were small, and the development moved toward 4 equal-sized wheels because they realized that not only the rear wheels had to work, the front wheels had to work too. And 2 manufacturers developed different concepts. Mercedes-Benz eventually introduced the MB Track, which certainly shared a number of distinct similarities with the iconic Unimog. However, the operator's position was situated in the center of the machine and elevated to a high vantage point, and the vehicle was constructed upon a remarkably rigid, torsion-resistant frame. 4 equal-sized wheels, all-wheel steering, all-wheel drive. So a very interesting system that was also very popular with farmers. In competition with that, strangely in the same year, also in 1972, the Klöckner-Humboldt DEUTZ company, KHD, then brought the InTrack onto the market.
On the InTrack, the cab is positioned right at the very front of the vehicle. At first glance, the unique rhombus-shaped cab takes a little bit of getting used to. However, in terms of driver comfort, it was truly unbeatable for its day. This is especially true because there is nothing to obstruct your clear view of any front-mounted implements. The MB truck, with its conventionally arranged engine in front of the cab, still strongly resembles standard tractors, but that doesn't mean the driver necessarily has a restricted view to the front. If the truck is equipped with a swivel seat, the driver can easily change direction. This is also made possible by a reversible gearbox. After working in the field, the tractor can then head back home facing the right way again. The modern tractor, as we know it today, does not have one specific birth date, nor can it be credited to just a single father. Almost simultaneously, starting from around the mid-70s, several distinct developmental strands began to converge and come together. The soft, rounded design aesthetic of the 1950s and 60s had increasingly given way to a much more angular, sharp design, as we can see here with the now legendary Hanomag Brilliant tractor. Sadly, Hanomag did not live to see the most important defining step toward the large tractors of today, because the company officially exited the tractor manufacturing business back in 1971. That was the monumental leap past the 100 horsepower barrier.
You just couldn't hit 100 horsepower with those standard four-cylinder engines. You needed 6 cylinders, and a lot of manufacturers were scared of that. Back in the mid-60s, that barrier was finally definitively broken, more or less by pure accident. The Swiss manufacturer, Hürlimann, was specifically asked to construct a high-traction machine for the knee circus. And just like that, they transformed the Hürlimann D800 into a powerful 100 horsepower tractor. That really broke the ice for the industry. Many other manufacturers soon followed suit, and Schluter, of course, is a very big name around here. And all of a sudden, having 100 horsepower just wasn't such a big deal anymore. Every single supplier eventually found they had to have a tractor that powerful on the market, regardless of whether it was a brand like Fendt or perhaps IHC. All of a sudden, everyone had 100 horsepower tractors in their product lineups, and it turned out that these machines really did find their place. Especially when it came to the task of soil cultivation.
But more engine power alone doesn't do much for even the best tractor. That power also has to be transferred to the ground. And this is where conventional rear-wheel drive systems start to reach their inherent limitations. Consequently, four-wheel drive is becoming significantly more common.
But there were always pioneers, and in Germany, maybe MAN with the Acker diesel was always someone who committed to four-wheel drive. Originally, maybe 3% of newly registered tractors had it. Today, we're looking at maybe 98% of tractors coming with four-wheel drive. The 100 horsepower tractors all have four-wheel drive, of course. You can see it in the design too. The wheel sizes are adapting more and more. But when I have tractors with this kind of engine power, then the corresponding implements follow. And so the whole equipment setup changes. And basically the four-wheel drive tractor, it's called a tractor just like the normal small one, but it's a different vehicle. Also for the operator, by the way, who obviously has to use the machine differently.
Farmers aren't just demanding more in terms of power, but also in terms of the speeds a tractor should reach. Time is a valuable asset even in the village.
Agriculture was originally designed for livestock farming, so everything was centered around the farmyard. The distances have expanded, the farms have gotten bigger. For Baden-Württemberg, I can tell you exactly, in 1950, the average farm size was 4.8 hectares. Today we're at about 25 hectares. In the new federal states, the average farm size is around 270 hectares. That means much longer distances and much more driving to be done.
A Fendt tractor is never an obstacle in public traffic. It is a completely equal partner on the road. Forget about clutching or shifting gears, as the tractor comes to a stop simply by pressing down on the brake. To get moving again, you just need to give it some gas. It is a green light for the Fendt tractor out on the road. The massive power reserves of the Favorite 10S Master even the heaviest towing jobs effortlessly. The driver appreciates the fully synchronized gearbox, the hydrostatic steering, and the turbomatic. Stopping and starting on a hill with a 20-ton trailer load is no problem for the favorite 10S with Turbomatic. The automatic startup feature prevents rearing and accelerates the tractor smoothly until it reaches its respective top speed.
Speeds of 30, 40 and even more kilometers per hour are suddenly no longer considered a taboo for tractors.
Farmers used to have the old Class 4 license. Nowadays, if you have a tractor that goes over 40 kilometers per hour, you need a truck license. So the requirements are getting higher, of course. Well, the reason for that is quite simple. In the past, the farmer or his wife did the driving, but nowadays, agriculture has become a truly professional industry. This means the operator drives the appropriate machine with all the right papers, is properly insured, and that is exactly what this new level of professionalization brings with it.
Part of the professionalization of the 70s and 80s, however, was also thinking about the farmer's comfort. Tractors are getting cabs.
The tractor is the farmer's workplace. The original form with that iron bucket seat isn't enough, of course. It's also damaging to the spine and carries high health risks. As the tractor driver becomes a professional, he basically needs a different workplace. And the solution was primarily the cab, also for safety reasons. From 1972, these roll bars became mandatory and a safety cage was built around the driver. Well, actually, the cab provides a bit more. Most importantly, it offers noise reduction, and that is a truly important factor. We measure engine noise levels nowadays, and we want the driver to be able to perform his duties at his workplace somewhat unharmed. So we prioritize noise insulation. And then farmers are particularly exposed to the extreme harshness of the weather. They used to always sit out in the open, and anyone in the profession can tell you skin diseases among tractor drivers were extraordinary. So here there's also protection against germs, dust, dirt, and everything else around the driver.
Soon, all cabs will be noise insulated with spring-mounted frames. This design absorbs road shocks much more effectively for the driver. And the driver's ergonomics are also coming into the designer's focus. The man or woman at the wheel should be able to reach every lever comfortably without having to contort themselves. Today, just as it was a century ago, the term tractor represents one thing above all: pure strength. Modern, massive tractors boasting 250 horsepower or more are simply not practical for the typical family farm, if only due to their incredibly high purchase costs.
Back in the day, farmers always had a rule of thumb for tractors. It was 1,000 marks per horsepower. For a vehicle like this, there's a new rule of thumb, and it's maybe 700 or 800 euros per horsepower at most. So the purchase price is in a completely different dimension, and for it to pay for itself, a vehicle like this has to be worked differently.
And in one way, that is certainly much easier than it was 100 years ago, but in another sense, it is also much harder. Hardly any modern large-scale tractor can manage to get by without complex computer control systems today.
With the tractors we use in modern farming, you are, of course, able to pull in data directly from space these days. Yet the Global Positioning System, or GPS, enables the comprehensive retrieval of all the relevant data points currently available. Modern agricultural tractors are now equipped with what is known as a data terminal, which is essentially a sophisticated laptop computer, if you will, from which all the various attached and mounted implements can be precisely managed and controlled. Well, you see, precision farming is actually quite possible in that specific area. This essentially means that you are able to assign very specific, complex tasks directly to the tractors. So the driver is ultimately reduced to someone who simply manages the steering wheel, while all of the other complex operations are handled automatically through advanced, seamless electronic synchronization.
While a tractor driver once required a great deal of physical muscle power to operate the steering and the gears, today it is all about having a delicate touch.
A proper, if you will, control unit located on the right, where all the essential elements are housed. Everything is neatly arranged in that space, ranging from the hydraulics to the various gear pre-selection options. Furthermore, this vehicle is fully climate controlled for your comfort. So if you don't mind, I am able to adjust the necessary temperatures right here inside the cabin, which allows the driver to focus entirely on the task of operating the vehicle from his seat while he manages all of the remaining functions using this specific control unit located right here.
The tractor market today is dominated by 5 providers who share about 75% of sales among themselves, while world market leader John Deere operates under one name. Case, for example, has kept many former names like New Holland or Steyr. But all the big corporations save on development costs by swapping components with each other.
This provides you with significant synergies, allowing you to leverage the global market, and you have essentially achieved true globalization within the agricultural machinery sector, long before others had even begun to discuss such possibilities. But that doesn't mean that national specificities are ignored. For example, for industrialized countries, John Deere has very complicated and technically sophisticated tractors in its range. When we look at developing nations, the vehicles they use are much more straightforward, essentially what you might call a stripped-down basic version. You can still find that signature John Deere expertise inside, but it is naturally tailored to suit the specific national market.
It was roughly 100 years ago that the first tractors were seen in the fields puffing along their paths, replacing the horses, the cows, and the people who had once stood in front of the heavy plow or the wooden wagon. The technical development of the tractor, probably the most important piece of agricultural equipment, seems almost like a small revolution.
4 wheels have remained, but otherwise everything has actually changed. Take the engine, the single-cylinder engine has become a 6 or 8 cylinder engine today. If you take the power, it was 10 or 12 horsepower at the beginning, and today we are easily in the range of over 200 horsepower for the large vehicles. What has changed regarding the wheels? Originally they were made of iron. Back in those days they really didn't have any suspension comfort at all. But nowadays we have these advanced Terra tires, which are high specification, low pressure rubber tires, and of course they provide us with optimal soil protection. What has actually changed? We used to have that old seat shell which felt just like solid cast iron. It was a constant blow to the head for every single operator. Nowadays we have a proper comfortable cab, and the transmissions have changed too, of course. Back with the LANZ, actually, even without a transmission, you could change direction, if you will, by reversing the rotation of the flywheel. And nowadays, we are using continuously variable transmissions. The speed has changed quite a bit. We used to be at 5 or 6 kilometers per hour. Nowadays, our vehicles are, if you will, in some exceptional cases, even fully highway capable. Although it must be said, the price has changed quite significantly over time. I wouldn't want to imply those first tractors were cheap. In truth, they were nearly impossible to sell as they were just experimental pioneer machinery. But nowadays, modern tractors are of course sophisticated, absolute high-tech machines that command a very high price tag. While the 4 wheels have remained, otherwise almost every single aspect of the tractor has completely changed. Well, perhaps even the name itself. Back in the day, it was commonly referred to as a traction engine, a hauler, or even a trekker. The word tractor has since become firmly established all across the world. So that's, if you will, a constant.
Yet technological progress is far from finished, though we cannot imagine what lies ahead, just as farmers a century ago could not have foreseen as they stood in awe staring at the first clanking mechanical monsters in their quiet fields.
When we look at the big picture, it is clear that the future of the tractor likely lies in the development of increasing intelligence. The tractor is taking over many tasks that the farmer once had to perform manually by hand. In the end, the tractor will drive with such incredible precision that no human driver could ever hope to steer it quite as well as the machine. Or perhaps the tractor will be able to utilize its mounted and attached equipment with such a level of optimization that no human operator could ever hope to match it. This means the tractor driver who once spent their time turning the steering wheel will ultimately be left with only monitoring tasks. Essentially, if you will, a state of automation with absolute perfection. That is in all likelihood the direction in which we are heading.